Hello, everyone. I am Stephanie Puryear-Helling, founder of SPH Services, leading people and teams to success, and welcoming you to the You Know You Deserve More podcast spotlight interview series. Next week is RPM Careers Week, starting Monday, April 14th, and running Friday through April 18th. And today we are getting a head start. And so I am interviewing some key leaders in multifamily and residential property management who have so much wisdom and experience and knowledge to share with you all. And so I've chosen one leader who is incredible and also someone I consider a dear friend. And before I jump into questions about leadership and leading change and resiliency, I want to tell you a little bit about my friend, Mindy Price. So, Mindy is the founder and chief why officer. I love that at Inside the Why. Mindy helps people connect purpose to action, turning clarity into momentum. Her leadership extends across multiple industries, including real estate, where she serves on the board of the Texas and the National Apartment Associations, the National Apartment Association Education Institute, near and dear to my heart, and currently serves as the chair of the National Suppliers Council. Mindy also helps companies go from grassroots levels to nationwide success. And so without further ado, Mindy, welcome. Thank you so much for saying yes to being on the You Know You Deserve More podcast. I am thrilled to have you here with me today, sharing your wisdom, experience, and knowledge with all of our listeners who are able to dial in today or who will be listening to this in the near future. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. It is an honor to be here with you. I appreciate you very much for asking me and allowing me the opportunity to say yes, because I will say saying yes in my career has been one of those pivotal aspects of it when I look back and know where I'm at today and where I started. However, I have learned the power of no.
Yes.
And there are
Also
reasons
important.
why we say no also. But I'm thrilled to be here with you today, especially gearing up right before the Residential Property Management Week next week. And there's so many incredible heroes that we'll be celebrating because everybody's a hero in our business. We truly care about what we do. And I just want to say thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So the first sort of area that I want to ask you about is transformational leadership. So a topic that you and I are both very passionate about, and we've had some conversations about. So when you think about leadership, you know, your leadership, Mindy, and all the things that you've done in multifamily over the years has inspired people to push beyond their perceived limits. So can you share your personal philosophy or an experience that has shaped your ability to lead in this way?
Oh, you know what? Wow. All right. You're hitting me with that one first, Stephanie. So I'm going to tell you it's a little personal and then we get into the professional, but it ties in. So I very young started with Gray Star. You have a history there too.
Yes.
And I was a teenager. And at 19 years old, I moved into the corporate office. And that was a lot of pressure. And I had to mature very quickly. And I had to absorb everything that I could. And I was in an incredible position in training where I was able to have an impact on brand new associates like I was at one point in time. And then also seasoned and incredible individuals that were going through training for different reasons. And somebody told me after one of my classes, I don't even think I've shared this with you, that they named their child after me. They named them
Wow.
Mindy. And you don't hear a lot of Mindys. And it blew me away. I was like, okay, even being so young and sometimes feeling like imposter syndrome, I
Mhm.
am having an impact because I'm doing something that I love, which is helping others. And that made a huge impact on me, and it gave me that extra kick of confidence that I think I needed to really jump in and say, I want to do more. Because Stephanie, it's not about me, it's about those that you're impacting. But
Yeah.
knowing at a young age I was able to make such an impact on somebody, to do that, and then to have a kiddo, named after me, which was really, really, really cool. And I
Wow.
even think about it, kind of get a little teary-eyed thinking about that. But always, as a professional and as growing up in leadership, because we're all in leadership roles, it doesn't matter if that's our title. That was something that I had to learn early on when I wanted to become a leader and I was trying so hard to do all the right things. What I realized is no matter what, I'm a leader in my own space, because everybody that's around me, that's on my team, whether they were a direct report to me or I was to them, we were all leading together. And I've tried to have a path that way where it's not about me, it's about everybody else and what impact can we have to help others.
I love that so much. So, my very best friend, I might have shared this with you, but my very best friend that I've had for the longest since I was 5 years old, her name is Mindy.
Nope, did not know that. I'm telling you, there's some pretty incredible Mindys out there.
Yeah, her name is Mindy.
Did not know that.
So it's a special name for special people for sure.
And our
Um,
parents may or may not have been fans of Mork and Mindy. Nanu, nanu.
right?
Got
Oh
that
my
all the
gosh,
time.
I loved working with you. Are you kidding me? Wow, wow. Okay, so the next thing I want to ask you about is emotional intelligence. And I love this topic because, there has been much more focus on the importance and significance of emotional intelligence as we show up as leaders in the workplace, leaders in our families. And I love that there's more focus on this topic and how essential it is. So, how has emotional intelligence played a role in your success as a leader? And what advice would you give to aspiring leaders looking to strengthen this skill?
So, emotional intelligence is a topic that it was a buzz topic for a while, a few years back, and I mean, it's still something that I think is really, really important. But just as recently as about maybe 6 or 7 months ago, so prior to starting my company, we were interviewing a gentleman who eventually was to come on board with us. And we were at a conference. It was actually his first few days with us at a conference. And he pulled me to the side and he said, Mindy, I've been watching you and I can tell that you're highly emotionally intelligent. And that took me aback a little bit. And I was like, oh, wow, thank you. And he goes, I'm watching how you interact with everybody under pressure, under stress, and the way you're trying to help everyone else and listen and guide with authority, but with empathy. That took me back. That I was thankful, a little weirdly embarrassed, if that even makes sense, because I've never had somebody just call it out like that. But I have always tried, Stephanie, to understand the emotions of others and give that breath and give it, even if it is something that I don't agree with, because there could be a conflict within an organization, but hearing others out and understanding their perspective and giving them that stage to have that, I think is incredibly important. And
Mhm.
when you do that, there are bonds that you don't even realize are being created between you and that individual because they trust you. And trust is so important. And I think that ties into emotional intelligence. And you get into a deeper understanding of the individuals that you're around, and you help them also open up in ways that they wouldn't normally be able to when you try and lead and guide that way.
I love that so much. And so, I took something that you said a moment ago, but guiding with authority and empathy. And I do think the two go hand in hand, right? Because yes, we need to be empathetic, but we need to do so in a way where we can still lead and guide people and not let our emotions or empathy get in the way of us making effective decisions in terms of how we're guiding people. So I love that you married the two of those. I also love that you mentioned trust, because that is the number one most important factor, foundation of every successful relationship, whether it's business, personal, or in between, right? Without trust, we have nothing. And the way that we build trust is being more human and showing up authentically as ourselves, but also making space and room for others to show up authentically. And when you are using that empathy that you do, you make it a safe space, right? For people to show up authentically as themselves and trust you. So I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Stephanie, do you mind? You
No.
just said something that took me into this AI world. And the buzzword that I'm hearing these days is authenticity. And I worry that younger leaders coming up could rely on AI and ChatGPT and Copilot for situations, which it's great to give it prompts. I'm dealing with this situation. This is the personality. This is the outcome that I need, or I think I need. Help me understand, which is good because it makes your mind open in different ways. But you don't want to be trained by AI. You want to, there is something to be said about your gut and your intuition. And that goes back to being the real you and the real authentic you. And if a team member sees or thinks that you're relying on AI too much, or it just doesn't sound like your true voice, you're going to lose credibility.
Yeah.
And I hope that in this age of AI that I love, by the way, but I just hope that we don't lose that emotional intelligence, because we don't want to rely on AI for that. We need to rely on who we truly are and the gifts that we have. And it's not just gifts, the knowledge. A lot of your intelligence and the things that you teach, Stephanie, you weren't born out knowing these things. You studied, you learned, you understood studies and statistics and different ways to go about teaching. And so I just really,
Well,
really hope that we
a
don't
lot
lose
of
that.
a lot of his life experience, right?
Yes.
Actually doing it. So to your point, I mean, I agree with you, but just like anything, with AI and oh gosh, 15 years ago or however long ago that was when we started implementing, tools to help us with follow-up that were a little bit more automated. And then, 10 years ago, it was online leasing and automated processes. And, there is value in leveraging tools and resources,
Absolutely.
100%, right? To do it better, smarter, faster, more efficient, all of the things. But at the end of the day, it's the humans that are using the tools. And so you do have to be strategic and thoughtful in how you're leveraging all these different tools. And I remember, in a training environment, when we were implementing all of these different follow-up tools, where you had templates, if you will, for different types of follow-up. But then some people would just send the template. They didn't customize it. They didn't, it didn't even say the person's name. So it was like, hi at name, right? And so it was a complete fail because they weren't using the tool and customizing it to really make it powerful and impactful. And I think the same goes for AI or any other new tool that comes out. You have to be smart and strategic about how you're leveraging that. And it should be in addition to who you are, right? But not a replacement of who you are. So there's been a lot of talk and people say, oh my God, AI is going to replace humans and it's going to replace all these jobs. Well, the only way that's going to happen is if you're not really mindful and thoughtful and strategic about how you show up and do your job. Because if you're just like plugging and playing and going through the motions, you can be replaced, and probably AI is going to do a better job than you do today because you're not being mindful and thoughtful. But if you are mindful and thoughtful and you're focused on human connection, all of the things that I really don't think can be replaced by AI, then you are irreplaceable. right? So it's about being smart and strategic. I love that you brought that up. And that's a whole nother podcast, by the way,
It
that
is.
we should
It
probably
is.
think about. No, we should. We should think about another one because I did a session a couple of years ago to bot or not to bot
Ooh,
and when to leverage automation and when it's really hurting your business versus helping you. So I'm making a note
okay.
because we should do another session. Great combo. Okay, so my next question for you is, let me go back to my little handy dandy notes here. Okay, so also on the topic of leadership, transformational leadership, looking back on your career, and you mentioned the person naming their child after you, which is a great story. But can you also think of a moment when you recognized that your leadership had truly transformed a team or an individual's career path?
So there's some really cool examples, but one that is more recent. And it's crazy how we go so during COVID, but I have a group of ladies that I went through the NAA Lyceum program with. And so we were doing virtual happy hours during COVID to stay in touch.
Fun.
And on one of them, Stephanie, I mentioned that I was hiring for a national sales executive. And if they knew of anybody, to please let me know. Well, after we get off, and they were like, of course, we'll share and we want to help. We always do that. I get a message from one of them that says, hey, I know I don't have any sales experience, but I would like to be considered for all of the following reasons. And this person had a very good reputation, a really good work ethic. I'd always been very impressed with them, but I was hiring for a national sales position and I wanted somebody with experience. But something in my gut told me to continue the conversation. And I did. And after a lot of conversations and after a lot of heart to heart, Stephanie, I ended up creating a junior national account position for this person. And I poured everything into them that I could, and they received it. Now, what is the key? I poured everything into them, but they received it. And that's important.
Yep.
And they took all of it and they were a sponge and they were not afraid to answer questions. And I loved the questions. Like I could tell they were, taking all of that. And within a couple of years and a little less than that, this person became my top performer for many years in a row.
That's
And
awesome.
I just love that. And it's taking chances on somebody. And I'm super thankful of that. I'm so proud of this individual. They're doing so well in their career. They have blossomed in so many ways. And it was all about not doing the normal and going with my gut and believing in somebody and investing in them. And I couldn't be more proud.
That is awesome. What a great story. And I'm a firm believer in giving people an opportunity if they have the right attitude
Yeah.
and mindset, right? And if they seem to be the right fit, because all the training in the world cannot change someone's attitude or mindset. Now, you can help positively nurture an already open mind, right? You can positively nurture someone who has a relatively good attitude, but needs to maybe grow a little bit more because we all do. Growth is a journey, not a destination. But no amount of development, coaching, training in the world is going to change someone who has a negative mindset or a bad attitude. So I'm a huge believer in that. Of course, experience is lovely and appreciated and important. So I'm not knocking that, but I do, fully believe in giving people an opportunity where it makes sense because that with the proper training, which training is to provide skills and knowledge, that they could be a success. And the last thing that you mentioned that I think is key, right? Someone has to be coachable. They have to be coachable, which again goes back to that attitude and mindset piece. I
It
love that.
does. one of my favorite quotes, Zig Ziglar. Oh, Zig, gotta love him. Your
Yeah.
attitude, not your aptitude, will determine your altitude.
That is one of my favorites. My drill team instructor said that to us when I was in high school. Your attitude rather than your aptitude determines your altitude. And she would be telling that to us when we were having to do hundreds of high kicks and kick higher, right? And that stuck with me all these years later. I love it.
I
All
used to
right.
have at the end of a lot of my sessions in our residential property management, I would end with that, and I would just say, the sky's the limit for you. Your attitude is so important. And what an industry where you can be immensely successful with a college degree, and you can be just as successful without one. The
Yep.
sky truly is the limit on the owner operator side, on the supplier partner side, Stephanie. This is a mystery of an industry. People still don't really understand it. It's like this hidden gem, even though we are a $1 trillion industry. And the most successful people, I think, if we took a poll, who do you see as one of the most successful individuals? And you just leave it open. And I think we'd see some of the similar names over and over again, and a lot of them different parts of the country. And it would be interesting to see which ones have degrees, which ones don't. And it might be 50-50. But when you narrow it down, I truly believe the thing we would hear most often is that positive attitude, that go-getter, that you can do it, that never give up, that perseverance.
Yeah, 100%. Growth mindset versus fixed mindset can take you so far in life,
Yeah.
so much further than, all of the credentials. And again, I'm not knocking credentials. I believe in them. I support them. I'm a learner. That's my number one strength for Clifton Strengths. But attitude and mindset trumps knowledge and skill when
Yeah, it
you're
sounds
just
fluffy, but
starting.
it's so
Right.
serious.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about leading change. So you've led teams through change. You've been through, change yourself. What are some key lessons that you've learned about overcoming resistance and ensuring smooth transitions? Because, I think one of the things, first of all, change is hard for most. 75% of change efforts fail within organizations. Um, Sometimes it's because people don't understand that there's actually a predictable cycle to change, right? So resistance is part of it. It's going to happen. You can't avoid it. You can mitigate some of that resistance, but you can't avoid it. So with teams that you've led through change initiatives, how have you helped them to overcome that resistance and ensure a smoother transition?
So you said something just a while ago. Change is hard. Change is hard. I mean, it is hard. But part of that phrase is part of the problem. It's about that attitude. It's about the way you look at it, and it's about reframing it. And so change can be difficult, but it's really not if you yourself have to understand the why. Why are we doing this? What is the impact going to be? Why did we even decide to do this? How are we going to put this information out to our organization so that they understand it? And so, first, it's understanding the why of the change. Why is this happening? And then it's about communicating that why in a way that everyone can understand. And Stephanie, that communication needs to be written at a level that everybody can understand. You hear about when you have information to give, you give it at a kindergarten or elementary school level. You fundamentally break it down to something that's very simple so everybody can understand it. And then you reiterate those points. And then you're open to hearing what others have to say. And then, Stephanie, letting the team members know it's okay not to be okay. Tell me why you aren't okay with this. Tell me what's holding you back from getting behind this, because I've shared with you these are the reasons why we're doing it. These are the opportunities for impact in a positive way for the company, for yourself, in residential property management for the residents. And here's why we're doing it. Here's how we're going to do it. And when you do all of those things that fundamentally sound so simple, takes a lot of planning, takes a lot of deep searching. When you roll that out properly and everybody understands their roles and everybody's very clear on it, the likelihood for success is so much higher than we're making this change, corporate said to do it, and we're constantly pivoting.
Exactly. And so if you do all of these things, that Mindy just talked about and that you heard, earlier when I interviewed Mike Holmes and Kirk Downey, right? There's some similar themes here. There is a process to leading change. And I loved what you said, and I have up here on the screen, Mindy, acknowledging for people that it's okay to not be okay, because we are emotional beings that are sometimes logical. And you can't forget the emotional impact and journey that change has on people. It doesn't matter the change, whether it's a personal change, a professional change. That there's a great book that's been around forever called Who Moved My Cheese?
Yes.
And it's an easy read about change. But
Would told me to read that. I'll never forget that.
So good. But there is a predictable cycle to change. And so when you said, acknowledging to people it's okay to not be okay, that's where that change is hard statement comes in, because you do need to acknowledge that for most people, for most of us, change is hard, particularly when it's not a change that we personally are deciding. And even when it's a change that we're deciding, it still can be hard. So when we say change is hard, that's that acknowledgement piece to say, yeah, you know what it is. So let's talk about it. Now let's move through and talk about what are the solutions, right? And how do we move through this so that we can come out to the other side and see the light at the end of the tunnel. But with most change initiatives, there's the current state, right? And then there's that desired future state for whatever reason you're making the change. Maybe it's a big technology initiative or implementation. Well, yeah, the future state's going to be gorgeous, but if you've been through one technology implementation, then it takes longer than you thought. There's going to be more problems than you thought. Things are going to be messy. Things are going to break. There's going to be glitches. People are going to get irritated because they like the old way. All of that is part of it. But if you know that ahead of time, then that's just part of the process. And then it does become easier. And to your point, though, when you were saying it's a mindset thing, it is, right? So do you want to have a growth mindset knowing that you'll get through it and that's a predictable cycle and you may fall into the pit, but then you're going to climb out? Or do you want to have a fixed mindset that says, well, we've always done it this way and it's never going to get better, or, I liked the old way better, or I can't do this, it's too hard. All of those fixed mindset messages are negative, and the change is going to be even harder because it's self-imposed at that point, right? So I love this. Is another conversation we could do, like a whole hour.
Write it down.
Whole hour. Whole hour. Okay. So my next question, let me get my little trusty list back up here, is so it's similar to the first question, but if you want to add anything to this. So when people are going through that change, and you mentioned some really good advice to people who are listening, how do you balance creating the need for stability that your team naturally has while also embracing disruption as an opportunity for growth?
So it truly goes back to that communication, and almost playing defense from the beginning, thinking about what does this look like? It's going to be disruptive. Why? What are the challenges that we're going to encounter? And then, just like a good leasing agent, a good sales professional would do, they're prepared with those objections already to be able to overcome those. So again, it goes back to the why. And when you
Mm-hmm.
can answer that question and you can think of all of the objections that you're going to receive when you're trying to implement this change and it's going to be disruptive, if you go back to the why and you can overcome that or enhance it in a positive way, it's going to be easier to get the buy-in of the team. Acknowledging that it is not perfect. You gave examples earlier about implementing a new system. That is very difficult 99% of the time. There's that 1%, there's a unicorn.
Yeah.
But I literally thought of whenever we implemented a new phone system, we went from a system that rang through our phones to a different one. And we all loved this one particular system, but it didn't do this one thing that we needed it to do. So we changed, and we were a little bit negative about that change. And it was a little bit of a pain. And the other system, I will say, and notice I didn't say any names, it was actually better, except for this one feature. But then we sat down and we looked at how much time that one feature saved us, Stephanie. And it was worth the headaches of everything else, because what can you not buy? You cannot buy more time.
Yeah,
It is
100%.
extremely disruptive to have time taken away from you. And if you can show the team how it's going to give them back time and
Yeah.
make their lives easier, the disruption that you're going to encounter ultimately is going to lead to a more positive outcome that's going to benefit you here, here, and here. And so, summing all that up, what does it go back to again? Communication, thinking through the process. What are the obstacles that are going to get in your way? Why are they going to get in your way? Why are you going in this direction? And then pushing forward.
Love it. Love it so much. And, communication is the key to everything, right? And when in doubt, over communicate, because it's a lot easier for, someone to take all the information that you've given them and pick and choose what they really need to pay attention to. But at least you've given them the information versus withholding the information, because this happens often in change initiatives where the decision makers or people at the top have been talking about something for months and months and months, and they haven't really socialized that with anybody, but they're ready to just move forward and make it happen, because to them, it's been a
They've
long
talked
time
about it.
It's been a long time coming. They've been talking about it, but they forget that the people who are going to be most impacted by the change or have a huge hand in making the change happen or implemented, they know very little, and they're not comfortable yet. They don't feel as confident as you do, because they haven't had 6 months to talk about it. They've had
Right.
maybe 3 weeks, right? And so going back to communication, that is such a key element. When in doubt, communicate something, because I'll tell you right now that what happens when you choose not to communicate?
Yeah. That doesn't go well.
People make up their own stories too. So then you've got all of the, water cooler talk and sidebar conversations that have been happening, where people are making up something to be oftentimes much scarier than it is, because you didn't communicate effectively. And now there's this whole, gossip mill that's happening. So communicate, communicate, communicate. All right. So my next question is, speaking of communication, what approaches have worked best for you when it comes to communicating change in a way that fosters buy-in rather than fear?
Ooh, I really think everything that we've said in this, because it's all encompassing of thinking through. Oh, here's something we haven't said: practice.
Mm.
What is the message that you need your teams to understand after fully thinking through what you're trying to communicate? I wonder how many leaders forget practicing in front of a mirror, in front of Zoom, on their phone, recording themselves, because this is what we call a crucial conversation or a crucial launch. Are they practicing what they're going to say, or do they think they just know the information and they're going to be able to disseminate it to the group in a way that everybody understands? I myself have failed, and I have seen other leaders fail, Stephanie, when they haven't practiced, because you have all these things that are in your mind. And this is something really important. And it may be something that you know is going to be disruptive. It is going to make people become afraid. So you want to make sure your message is on point and that you practice what you want to say, not once. I say practice 10 times. And when you do that and you feel good about listening back, and maybe have a confidant, this is something that's super important.
Mhm.
Having that circle of trust, those friends that you can practice with. This is important. This is why. Because when you have big decisions and changes that you need to make, it's bigger than you, it's bigger than me, it's impacting so many individuals. Practice.
I love that. So I love practicing in front of a mirror, on it, recording yourself on Zoom, on your phone, whatever the case may be, because it's very different in your head
Yes.
than it is watching your facial expressions, right? Which only 7% of communication are the words that we actually speak. So
Right.
how does your face look? How are you holding your body? Are you confident about what you're communicating to them? And then the second piece of that I also loved is choosing either a confidant or a small group of people. And then I think also the third thing that I'll add is layering the communication. And so making sure that it's a tiered approach. So who needs to hear it first, right? Well, the rest of your core team needs to hear it. And not just one-way communication, but hey, here's the message, but give me your feedback, and
Yes.
what am I missing here? Or what do we need to address that maybe is not included, that's going to resonate most with the concerns of our team, or the audience that's receiving this message, and then layering it from there and taking it to the next level so that it's not all being heard at once. And then you've got that opportunity to get that feedback and really be thoughtful about what you're saying, how you're saying it, who the right audience is. Love that. All right, so my next question for you is, and I had to close this because my teenager was texting me and I was doing double duty because we have
Real
to
life.
pick up next for prom tomorrow. Okay, so my next question is related to resiliency. So resiliency is another topic that I'm very passionate about because one of my sort of missions is to help others build their own personal resiliency, but also to build resilient teams, because the more we build our resiliency muscle, the easier it is for us to navigate change and things of that nature. So when you think about the different teams that you've led or that you're currently leading, Mindy, what are some things that you've done to cultivate resilience within your teams? And what do you think the strategies that you've used have been most effective in keeping morale strong during challenging times?
I think having an open door with my team, I've always had that. And I am one that is a fan of friendships in the workplace. I was very lucky early on, as I mentioned in the beginning, to have that job where at 19 years old, I was working in the corporate office and had to prove myself very quickly. And I think I was there for about 4 years and became very good friends with the person who was my direct report. And I had to learn some hard lessons too, that there is a time for friendship and then there is a time for business. And we have to, put a different hat on. And there were certain conversations I wasn't allowed to be in. And I found out later on. And quite frankly, there were times I was a little bit upset about that. But as I got older and I moved into more leadership roles, and again, we're all leaders in different ways, but what you might think of as a traditional leadership role, I realized in those tough moments, Stephanie, why there was a boundary between that friendship and then that business. This goes back to resiliency, though. When you can have that trust, and maybe it's not your best friend at work, but it's somebody that you do consider a friend, a confidant, um, value that person in a deeper way. I was at Jackie Roan's retirement, and she talked about how amazing is it that half the people in this room, when I hang up the phone, I say, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about a faux pas. We would never talk about that before. We are an industry that is so close. Multifamily is family.
Yeah.
And the friendships that you have, I think, help with resiliency, because everything is not sunshine and rainbows. And there are difficult tasks that are at hand at times. There are difficult team members, difficult residents, difficult policies, difficult changes. And sometimes it's those relationships that help you become resilient, like that sponge. Something hits you and it bounces off because you look around at the support that you have. And that naturally just helps you be stronger in those moments where you might be weak or you might be frustrated. And so leading by truly caring about everyone on my team, whether it's a direct report or somebody that is, I'm directly reporting to, or somebody at the same level, I believe that has helped in my success. And I think if leaders are okay with friendships, not every personality is going to clash, but if you truly try to look into somebody, if we were all the same, we would not be happy. Everybody on our team, you're going to do a disc profile on me, Stephanie. I know mine, but I'm curious to see how it's changed since the last time I did it. And we think about how we hire those different personalities. Not everybody's going to be where, your buddy where you want to go have a coffee or a cocktail after work, but you do have these friendships, and there's this deeper trust than just that work relationship. Now, there are definitely some mutual respects that are out there, because you're like, oh, game is game. Like, I appreciate you, and you're tough. Maybe we're not friends, but I respect you. I understand there's benefits to both of those. My personal style is I'm going to show up hard. I'm going to work very hard. I'm going to, want to stay on task, but I appreciate those relationships along the way. And I feel like they truly have helped work through some of the most difficult times and challenges that I've had in my career.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I mean, obviously I'm biased because I've been in this industry, most of my adult life, like you. But I truly do think that multifamily is uniquely special. When I talked to other friends that are in very different industries or lines of business, sure, they develop relationships and they have work friends, but I have never seen or heard about anything that's quite like what we have in multifamily. And it's pretty special and amazing, right? And I am one of those people that Jackie Roan says, I love you. And I tell her the same thing. And I'm super sad that I wasn't able to be there in person at her retirement party, but the pictures looked awesome. And it was so awesome to see so many people show up for that incredible woman. And I loved what you said about, I used to have fear of Jackie, and now I want to be like Jackie. It's very cute. Very cute. I've never had a fear of Jackie, but I'm also like a high D, which I'm pretty sure she is. And so like I get her, we speak the same language often. So, okay. So leadership also comes with amazing things, but it does come with intense pressures because while leading and working with people can be one of the most rewarding things, like we just talked about, it can also be one of the most challenging things. I have a business coach and one of his coaches, and they say all the time that my biggest problems have a first name and a last name. And sometimes it's the person in the mirror, let's be honest. Okay.
Yes.
So leadership comes with intense pressures. How do you personally maintain your own resilience to prevent burnout?
Oof. Burnout. It does. And I will tell you, there have been times in my career when I look back, I even said career, burnout.
It's late in the day. It's okay.
There have been times where I look back and you're just going through those motions, and I literally found myself at one point in time becoming a yes person and just a doer and like getting it done. Like, yeah, people are looking up to me and they're like, "Hey, what do we do now?" And I'm like, "Go, go, 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 go!" And you're so intense on here comes another change, and now you got to pivot and move and make it happen, and you're just this yes person, and you're getting the job done. But you look back and the phone rings, you're like, oh, I got to take this call. Oh, I got to take this call. Oh, I know it's 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning or it's 10 o'clock at night. You have to have self-care and you have to be aware of where you're at. And if you find yourself and you're just being that yes person and you're implementing things without asking questions and digging into the why, Stephanie, that we talked about earlier, and then fully understanding it in a way that you can understand it as a leader, and you can then layer that information into your teams, as you said, Stephanie, doing that is going to help you so much more because you're not biting off more than you can chew. You're putting boundaries, and you also have to take care of yourself and have self-care. And this is something that I've started recently, and I'm just trying it. There's somebody that I found on LinkedIn that I started following. I'll probably butcher her name, but Amanda Getz, I think that's how you say her name. And I took one of her courses, and she talked about it's probably nothing, it's not necessarily new to her, but it resonated with me in a way. She said, you have this block of time, and we have so many distractions around us. If you would literally block off chunks of time and not get distracted by anything else, clean off your desk, focus for that amount of time. And then once you do that, so she talks about in 6 hours, you can get so much more work done in chunks of time. If you block off your 15 minutes, if you're going to be on your phone or you're going to go take a walk or whatever you're going to do, you will accomplish so much more if you stay focused and you're not distracted with everything. So for me, I'm really trying to take the first couple hours of my morning for solid focus on whatever it is that I have, and I'm not going to let anything get in the way, because guess what? That email, that text message, that LinkedIn post, that Facebook post, that social, whatever it is, that is a distraction, that will help somebody, will be a distraction. And when we're distraction, that also is burnout. And I am huge on taking time for yourself. And I fell away from this, and I would always talk about it in my classes. Take an afternoon break and take a morning break. Walk around the block, do something. You will come back a better version of yourself than just trying to push through, because when you're just pushing through, you might halfway be doing things. Yeah. And so I think that's really, really important. Self-care, get in the gym, do what matters to you. Time blocking absolutely is something that will definitely help leaders, and just not getting in that rut of being robotic, grounding yourself again and asking yourself, why am I in this business? Why am I in this position? Why did I, choose this career path? And when you can reconnect with that kid in a candy store that you were when you first got started, and you realize this was an industry that you probably didn't even think you wanted to be in, it will reignite that fire within you.
I love that so much. So self-care came up on my earlier podcast interview with Mike Holmes. We talked a lot about that, and I couldn't agree more. And I think modeling that for others. And so you said, I would train people in my class, but then I realized, I have to follow my own training. And we do have to be self-aware that when we're not allowing ourselves to really take care of ourselves. And I think, those of us who like to serve, those of us who may have, people pleaser tendencies, and certainly we all are challenged with this as humans, but I want to, call out to moms, working moms, because, generally speaking, moms take on a little bit more of the lion's share of all of the other things, and, caretaking and people pleasing. And so you really do have to be mindful about, are you giving yourself the time that you need to refresh and recharge and really show up as your best self? And it's like they say on the airplane, right? Put your oxygen mask on first before you put it on your children. And you can't pour from an empty cup. And so if
Right.
you are just burning the candle at both ends, eventually you are going to completely burn out. And so being aware of that. I wanted to share something else with you, and I was looking for this. This is from my Mindset Monday post. So I was on one of our calls with Mark Cole, who's the CEO of Maxwell Leadership, and he gave us a lesson Monday night. And there were a couple things that resonated with me that tie in beautifully to what you were just sharing. And you also mentioned earlier when I said, thank you for saying yes to the podcast. You're like, well, so many things have happened great for me in my life because I said yes, but it's also important to know when to say no. And so this relates to that as well as what you were just talking about. So on Monday, I had the privilege of joining, Maxwell Leadership Call on Zoom with Mark Cole. And he led the lesson, but he also referenced one of John Maxwell's 91 books, Intentional Living. And so some of the things that Mark said, I wrote down and then I shared it in a post. Every effective to-do list starts with a to-don't list. Love that. Success isn't just defined by what you say yes to, it's also shaped by what you say no to. Growth isn't just about adding, it's about subtracting to make room for what truly matters. Are you carrying distractions that steal your focus? Are you saying yes to things that drain your energy instead of driving your purpose? Preparation isn't just about doing more. It's about letting go of what holds you back, what needs to go so you can grow. And I think that relates to everything that you were just talking about with respect to self-care as well, because part of that is, are we being mindful about how we're using our time? And, you said when we first hopped on, you're like, how many of these are you doing today? But strategically, I wanted to get them done. First of all, I'm not traveling today and Monday. Okay. But I was all of this week and then most of next week. But secondly, it was time blocking, because if I'm creating the graphics and scheduling the interviews and crafting, the documents with the bios and the prep questions and all of that, I'm in flow. I'm in that same block of energy and mindset, so I can do it faster, more efficient, and be in flow because it's all related, versus if I were trying to pepper them in one here, one there. Not that I won't do that, because I will have to do that too. But when I can time block, I try to maximize that, because then I can stay in that same lane. And so the other part of my day has been spent on 3 different calls with people talking about our next Live to Lead event. So today is Live to Lead, and you deserve more podcast spotlight interviews with a lean to RPM Careers Week. And then I'm like, okay, that's time blocking. So anyway, I love what you just said. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that too.
Yeah. Okay. So I have 2 more questions for you as we wrap up our hour together. So the last one about resilience. Do you believe that resilience is just something that people are inherently born with? Or do you believe it's something that's built? Or do you believe it's a little bit of both?
I absolutely believe it's a little bit of both. I think there are some people that just somehow they just seem to be born resilient. From coming out of the womb to standing up and falling and getting back up and picking themselves up, and all through life, they're just those people. But they also learn over time with great mentors and coaches. And then there are some folks that it comes a little more difficult for, but with the right mentors and coaches and leaders, I do believe that you can learn a lot about resiliency, and you can learn a lot about overcoming negativity by literally just reframing the way you look at something. So we've talked about change. We've talked about difficult times. A simple example of this, of reframing. I recently got back in the gym, and I decided not to get up at 5 a.m. any longer to go to the gym. I'm getting up at 6. But every morning at 6 o'clock, Stephanie, I was dreading it. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to get up. I was in such a good sleep. And, I was just kind of dumpy. And my mindset was like, ugh. So the past 2 weeks, I've changed that. And when I get up in the morning, I'm like, I cannot wait to start my day. It's going to be great. I know this is going to make me feel better. I always have more energy throughout the day. Look, there are mornings that I am saying this to myself and I am so tired, but then I get it in my mind and I'm looking forward to it. I go to bed now and it's only 2 weeks later. I'm going to bed and I'm looking forward to getting up the next day. 5 days this week. I made it. First week I've done 5 days in a row. And it was normally Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I was like, nope, this week I'm 5 days. And it was just reframing that. I caught myself earlier this week saying something that wasn't necessarily negative-ish, but it kind of had a hint to it. And I was like, oh, what if I try saying it this way? And I did. And then my teenager came home from lunch and I was working from the house and he said something and I was like, hey, what if you say it this way? And he goes, what? And he said it and he just started smiling. He goes, I see what you did there. So I think I want to have everybody thinking about reframing because you can be resilient and things that would because you can teach that, right? You can teach resiliency. Are some people just naturally blessed with it? Yes, but they can even be better.
Yeah, agreed. And I do, and I ask this question to everybody. It fascinates me, different people's, thought processes. Yes, I do agree. And studies show, right, that some people are inherently born a little bit stronger, right? A little bit more resilient. It actually is part of our DNA. And then it's also how we're raised, our environment, then the circumstances. But beyond that, we all have an opportunity to build resiliency. And I'm so passionate about that I'm writing a book about it and developing a course and all of those things. But we do have the ability to do it. And it really is exactly what you were just talking about, in large part, Mindy, mindset, right? What are the words that we're speaking to ourselves? Mm-hmm. And are we speaking life and possibility into ourselves? Or are we speaking negativity and scarcity mindset? One of our mentors and faculty members at Maxwell Leadership, Chris Robinson, I was on a call with him a month ago. And one of our mentorship members was talking about a change that happened in her business. And she lost like her biggest client that she was pretty much banking on, for the next 2 years. And, they had some changes in their company and it ended up not working out. So she was living in fear, right? What if she's like, I'm trying to be positive, Chris, but this is really scary and da-da-da. And he said to her something that stood out to me, and I've got it written down, but not in front of me. So I'll try to do my best. But he said, fear and faith have the same energy. And it's thinking about something that hasn't happened yet. So how do you want to choose to look at that? And I loved how he simplified that for her, right? And so resiliency is just like, and I love your analogy too, going to the gym, building your resiliency muscle in your brain and your heart and emotions is just the same as when you go to the gym. It's harder at first. Mm-hmm. You're going to feel more pain. You're going to maybe tell yourself, I can't do it. Oh my God, what have I done to myself? But then the more you do it, it becomes easier, not just physically, but also in your mind. And now, like you said, you're looking forward to it. And now you're probably going to get to a point where you can't imagine a day without it. Right. And that's what happens with resiliency. And when we have things that happen in life that are hard, and we've all had things that have happened, after we've been human and felt the emotions and been upset and been in denial and cried and grieved and all the things that also goes to organizational change, we basically have two decisions. Do we want to stay in the bottom of the pit and be miserable and live that over again and oh, woe is me like Eeyore? Or do we want to say, okay, I've felt the pain. I'm tired of feeling this way. So now what am I going to do about it? Do we want to be better? So bitter or better, which are, two choices. So thank you. Great combo. And I'd love to continue lots of pieces of this in the future. So I already have my wheels spinning and we'll follow up. But my last question to you as we wrap up, obviously next week is RPM Careers Week. which, part of it is about celebrating the awesome people that make our industry great, both on the owner operator side, supplier partners. But when you think about people who perhaps are looking at a new career or maybe graduating school, whether it's high school or college, looking for opportunities, what would you tell a future leader in residential property management about why they should consider this industry and the opportunities that are available to them?
Well, I never thought there were so many opportunities in this industry. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier when I realized. So, first of all, I was going to school for radio TV broadcasting. I wanted to be the next Lisa Miloski, back in the day, sportscaster,
Awesome.
and stumbled into this role in leasing is where I first started out. And when I realized I was helping run a multi-million-dollar asset, it completely changed my world. And I knew at that moment, another show, I'll tell the story on it, that I wanted a career. And I focused. And I have had such a rewarding career on the owner operator side, so the owner management side, and on the supplier partner side. And now being lucky enough to have my own company that is inside the industry and outside. So, branching my wings too. But I would not be here today if it were not for this industry and all of the people that have helped me along the way. And I think that's key. Most of the folks that you'll talk to in this industry will tell you about the mentors that they've had. This is an industry that gives back. We are here to help and serve others. And we take that mindset in helping others along the way too. And if somebody feels like they're missing out or they just haven't felt where they belong, this is an industry that will make you feel that you belong, and the sky's the limit. There are so many opportunities for you in many different ways, many capacities on the owner operator management side, on the supplier partner side. It will blow your mind. I would say if you weren't thinking about it, you should be. And if you are thinking about it, what's holding you back?
I love it. Mindy, it's been such a pleasure and an honor to have you here today. Thank you for saying yes. I am very excited about your new venture with Inside the Why. I look forward to many more conversations with you. And to everyone for either tuning in today or listening to the replay, thank you for tuning in to the You Deserve More podcast spotlight interview with Mindy Price from Inside the Why. Tune in to our upcoming episodes as we celebrate more of RPM Careers Week next week, starting Monday morning. Thanks, Mindy. Appreciate you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.